Well, this is like the week of legal BS. I mean, obviously we talked about the crazy patent, or not patent, but the lawsuit against Corsair regarding package speeds that are on the DDR boxes and how there's a $5.5 million claim on that. Obviously, everyone's been closely following the whole Bloomberg thing and Gamers Nexus and the strike, and Gamers Nexus has got that video back up now, and now he is just on a warpath against Bloomberg and YouTube. Although that YouTube fight, that's wasted energy as far as I'm concerned with Steve, because everyone's been complaining about the strike system for more than a decade. It's just the first time Steve's experienced it firsthand, so now it's like bigger on his radar because it hit him personally, but that's never gonna change from YouTube. Now we've got these two new patents that have passed the USPTO, or the United States Patent and Trade Office, making it very, very bad for the future of games. All I have to say is, in this fight against Nintendo, common sense, I choose you. Enhance your professional monitor setup with the Viewsonic VP27885K, featuring 100% sRGB, 99% DCI P3 colors, and HDR 400 for deep contrast that align perfectly with Mac's industry-leading color performance. The VP27885K supports laptops, PCs, Macs, and more with Thunderbolt 4, USB-C, HDMI DisplayPort, and USB inputs. If you're looking to increase your screen real estate for projects, click the link in the description for more. Yeah, September's been a crazy month. So, okay, we're gonna talk about quite a few things here. I will put a TLDR at the end. There's gonna be a lot of jargon in this one, but it's messed up. And to be fair, this is not that surprising because Nintendo has been absolutely notorious for being extremely aggressive regarding like takedowns of any sort of like Nintendo IP put into videos. The crazy part is like, Nintendo would invite out influencers to cover things like the Switch and like Mario Kart when it came out and all this stuff, but then they went and like struck everyone that used the game in their videos. So that's the company we're talking about here. The company that says, come on out and cover our thing, but if you use our thing, we're gonna strike you. And they don't care. They absolutely don't care. It's like, to me, it's like Nintendo feels very disconnected when it comes to being modern. It's like they're stuck back in the 80s, the Japan 80s thing. It's so weird. Anyway, moving on. Two patents have passed this month, one on September 2nd and one on September 9th. So we'll talk about those two patents and why you'll be able to hear instantly why this is so dangerous for the future of gaming. So US patent 12/403/397. Technically, that's just the number of the patent, the 12,403,397th passed patent in the US Patent Office. On September 2nd, that is specifically regarding storage medium and game processing method. That doesn't mean storage in like the way the game is stored on your computer. It means storage for the character within the game, right? How things are stored within the game. But just to kind of paraphrase the patent itself, the core loop from the abstract and figures, the player triggers a sub-character to appear, right? So common sense, I choose you, right? So I have now summoned common sense, which is never gonna happen. If the enemy is at that location, the system controls a battle in first mode, or player operation battle, right? So there's a bad guy there, I've summoned a character, we're now gonna fight that bad guy because the enemy is present at that location. So the system controls a battle in first mode, player operated battle. If no enemy is there, the system autonomously moves the sub-character until battle conditions arise. So you summon a character, there's nothing there for it to fight, it's just a companion. It's by your side, you move to where there's an enemy, then it moves into the second mode, or an auto battle progression, where the battle starts automatically. And the battle can proceed. Think, send out your companion to fight where enemies are, otherwise it wanders until the fight starts. That is the core of US patent 12/403/397. For the rest of this video, I will refer to that patent as 397, so I'm not saying that number a million times. The second patent that passed and was issued on September, and I say passed, we'll talk about this again later, the US Patent and Trade Office's job is to make sure that the patent is valid, make sure that the patent is fair to both the inventor and the future. Its job is to protect the inventor's IP and physical design, where applicable, and to make sure that that design does not stifle or chill the forward momentum of technology. So if someone were to patent like the wheel, right? You can see the problem behind that. People who own patents also, it gives them a legal right to fight to sue companies for either proceeds or portions of sales, etc. And that also is more often than not used as a deterrent system to keep people from copying you, because they can then sue you for patent right infringement and then actually go after your proceeds and your profits and all of that. So as you can see, like if someone were to quote unquote patent the wheel, any round thing that causes forward momentum, you can see why that would be a problem. So that would be the kind of patent that should be investigated and seen as, well, the wheel exists, somebody invented the wheel, we're going back to caveman ages at this point, right? But it also would absolutely chill forward momentum. So it would be like shot down. That's the whole point of the USPTO. US 12,409,387 issued September 9th says a non-transistory game program regarding ride and fly switching. So the core loop of this patent, and the core loop basically refers to as the core of the design, right? So that's what they mean by core loop. Select an air or ground mount. When the air mount moves to ground, the player is automatically switched into ground movement state, and vice versa. So let's say you're flying a mount. Let's talk about Warcraft for a second here, because that goes back a lot before a lot of the Pokemon stuff. Although I guess you could argue too, if you're going back to like SNES and NES days, who designed it first, right? But the idea is like, if you're flying in a Warcraft mount and you go to the ground, that mount transitions to a ground mount, right? And starts running. And then you hit space and you jump and now it's flying. That's an auto transition, meaning you didn't control the state change or the transition from one mount type to another. This patent patents that idea, that transitioning from a ground mount to an air mount, or an air mount to a ground mount, now belongs to Nintendo. So a seamless boarding and state switching between riding and flying and ground and traversal. So I'll be referring to that one as 387. So remember, 397 is about summoning a companion and having it either fight automatically or follow until a fight state exists. And 387 is about transitioning mount types and it being an auto transition from flying to ground or ground to flying and any traversal in that state. So a lot of the industry has been covering this because this really ties down to Nintendo's ongoing battle between Pocket Pair and Pal World. Pal World is, for all intents and purposes, very similar to Pokemon. Okay, to the whole idea of Pokemon Go. Remember, Pokemon Go was the AR version, the augmented reality of it. But obviously, Pokemon goes back decades, right? But Pal World is like the biggest title to really exist within a development firm that's probably large enough to be able to actually go against Nintendo head on. Okay, not only just in the idea of having a competing IP that's similar-ish to a game, but to have the size to not be deterred by Nintendo's legal threats, if you will. Now, let's talk about other games. You might look at that and go, well, if Pal World is just like Pokemon, then they have a leg to stand on. But let's roll back even farther. You had your top-down RTOs, right? You have, let's talk about World of Warcraft. I'm gonna go there because Blizzard's been around a long time, so as the Warcraft IP. It goes back to the 90s as far as I know. World of Warcraft came out after like EverQuest, but EverQuest was arguably for a long time the biggest MMO. And the way that the game operates, or I should say the MMO operates between EverQuest and Warcraft and World of Warcraft are very, very similar. So if you can patent an idea of how a game works, or the whole idea between like you control a character, you battle in this way or whatever, then that would stifle or chill the forward momentum of any other games existing in that type of genre. So in Nintendo's idea, there'd be one game for every genre, honestly. And that's where the chilling is the problem here when it comes to the way that the USPTO did not do its diligence on making sure that these patents that were issued, unchallenged by the way, and we'll talk about where that comes in a moment, really is bad for the industry as a whole. The problem with this is that the patent is too broad. It's way too broad. It's actually the USPTO's job to make sure that a broad patent is not issued in a manner at which it would chill forward momentum, and I already said that. So it's their job to do diligence and check other IPs and other patents that may exist, or other art, in this instance, this is considered art, that exist prior to these patents being basically applied for. Now, this sounds a lot like the way patent troll companies work. There's companies that exist out there that do nothing but go out and find unprotected IP, unprotected ideas and patents that don't exist that big companies already kind of operate under. Get the patent, even though they don't have to prove they developed anything, and then you use that patent as leverage and basically extortion for those companies that already exist, so that you have to now start paying them because they patented something that that company didn't do its due diligence to protect its own IP. Nintendo is basically kind of following that model, but they're not a patent trolling office. Like there's companies that do nothing but that. Anyway, but it's being called too broad. So coverage in VGC, Game Developer, Forbes, Games Radar, and Kotaku have stated that 397 is effectively claiming the summon to flight paradigm common to Pokemon likes and many RPGs, like I already mentioned Warcraft as an example. Heck, EverQuest had flying mounts too. Heck, I think even RuneScape might have flying mounts. I could be wrong. RuneScape's a very low quality browser-based MMO. But anyway, RuneScape goes back, way back. But raising obvious prior art questions. Now, there's some big names in the legal department that have spoken out against this. You got IP, or intellectual property attorney, Kirk Sigmund, I'm not sure, called the grants an embarrassing failure of the USPTO. And I explained why. They didn't do their job to make sure that these patents are not too broad, and they're not just a blanket patent that could now cover things far outside the scope at which Nintendo's targeting, but it gives Nintendo now legal recourse to go wider than the net they've cast if they so desire. But here's the crazy one. But he also goes on to say that it's a weak prior art review and the potential or procedural oddities in prosecution. Now, Don McGowan, the former Pokemon CLO, or the chief legal officer, the dude's a lawyer, formerly a lawyer, specifically within the Pokemon IP, he doubted the enforceability and predicted that prior art would suffice if litigated. Now, here's the problem with that. I think Don here might be slightly disconnected in that he's worked for such a big company for so long. The idea of litigation and going to either mediation or settlement or even court is just an automatic idea because he works for big companies that can afford to do that. But this is a problem for small indie companies. This is a problem for small development firms that make games that don't have the ability or the funds to even protect themselves from this. The mere thought of being taken to litigation by Nintendo is enough to deter anyone from wanting to even challenge their right to being protected, even though this is too broad of a patent. So the cost alone with protecting themselves is the deterrent. And now the problem is, let's say you are big enough to potentially go to court over this, you could potentially even bankrupt yourself with the cost of protecting yourself. So just going to court even to win, it doesn't win you any damages. It doesn't get you anything in return other than you can continue to move forward with the way you're operating. But if you spent all of your capital as available to protect yourself, you're essentially out of business to protect yourself. So that's why a lot of companies are probably now just going to be afraid to even try and design anything now that exists under this, these broad patents that have been issued. But what about those companies that are already there? Their games are already on Steam. Their games are already selling. It's now up to Nintendo's discretion who they want to go after. And they have the funds and the legal team to do it. That's the difference here. Now, how broad is broad here? Well, press recaps and the patent docs emphasize general conditions. Sub-summoning a character, right? Most MMOs have sub-characters that or mounts or pets or something you can summon, right? And they fight and do things autonomously. Let's see. Right, so control in battle versus autonomous roaming, etc. Creating a genre-wide chilling effect. Now remember, the chilling effect means no one else will be able to start to use that concept or idea because it belongs now to one firm. And then the other one being, obviously summoning auto-transitioning mounts from ground to flying or potentially aqua, like mount transition type being automatic is covered under that patent. So existing games that these patents currently would land on top of. Palworld, obvious. These whole patents exist, we believe, and everyone pretty much believes, exclusively because of Palworld. The problem is so many other games now fall under these broad patents that it's going to expand beyond Palworld, we're pretty sure. It's kind of like Nintendo's upset that someone did their thing better, so now they're just gonna try and stop them by having these patents. But we're really hoping that the Power World, parent companies will fight Nintendo on this, because we need these patents to be overturned, and the USPTO really sucked at doing their jobs on this. But anyway, Temtem, Digimon Story, Cyber Sleuth, Yokai Watch, Dragon Quest Monsters, Ni no Kuni, Shin Megami, Tensei, Persona, even Pikmin, which is Nintendo's own IP, and so many RPGs with user-triggered summons. You tell me any sort of MMO or RPG that doesn't have a auto-transitioning summon or a companion that can be summoned to fight alongside you, either by your control or autonomously. You're gonna have a hard time finding a title that doesn't include that.
Yeah, I just realized Final Fantasy summons come out of a ball too, so.
Oh boy. Now here's the thing, for actual infringement or real infringement, it has to do with claim matching, or how the sub-character is generated and placed, and what the at location means, and how the two modes operate. So this is where the broadness of the patent really comes into scrutinization here. Some devs note that claims might actually be narrower than the headlines have implied, specific throw to trigger capture and battle loops, but that the nuance still doesn't remove the litigation risk. And that litigation risk is what is the deterrence for most of these dev studios to just not even take on, Nintendo really is Goliath in this instance, and most of these devs really are David. Now we know how that story turned out, but that's not always gonna be the case, right? The US Patent Office is getting roasted justifiably. How's that? Lawyers and look, when you've got the CLO, the former CLO of Pokemon itself saying, this isn't gonna hold up, this is bad. And you got IP lawyers saying, this is far too broad, it's a problem, right? Now the problem isn't the fact that Nintendo tried. Companies that apply for US patents always apply a very broad patent because the company wants the widest net casted possible. And it's the USPTO's job to say, nope, can't do that. There's already things that exist. That chills forward momentum. You need to narrow it down and be more specific about what it is you're covering. But what's crazy about both of these patents is this crazy ass wide net was thrown and the office was like, gotcha, buddy, pass. Oh, here's a rubber stamp on number 2, right? It's crazy that there was no challenge. And I think honestly that's because the crypt keepers that now work at the USPTO, we've all seen the way, now these aren't lawmakers, right? This is part of a US office, but we've seen the type of people that are involved in lawmaking and the whole discussion about games. These are folks that Pong was cutting edge in their time, right? They're the ones making the determinations on this. I think there was just a clear non-understanding of previous art that already existed prior to any of this being a thing, and just assuming Nintendo, oh, I recognize that Nintendo, I had the Nintendo, I got it from my grandson. Nintendo, they're a good company. We'll pass that one. They probably invented it. There was just no diligence. There was no fact checking. There was no prior art checking. There was nothing. There was just an immediate, off you go, you can have it. There was a lot of procedural shortcuts that took place here too. Write-ups described that parent and sibling filings where claim tweaks plus examiner interviews quickly overcame initial pushback, seen as rubber stamping, especially for gameplay abstractions. That's quoted by PC Gamer. Basically, that's what they're saying is that there was no pushback. There was no challenge. There was no, hey, provide us the IP, the timelines, and prove that you are the ones that designed all of this idea. Now, it's mind-boggling. Yes, I said mind-boggling on purpose. It's mind-boggling to think that there was no pushback whatsoever on this, because almost every patent gets kicked back the first time. It's the natural progression to just have it kicked back because they want to challenge you as the U.S. patent applicant to prove you own this IP. For it to just be automatically pushed through is unprecedented for the USPTO. And they've done some major fuck-ups in the past, and this is egregiously negligent, in my opinion, on them doing their job. The problem here is now that patents have been granted, it is notoriously difficult to ungrant a patent. And the funny thing is, it's really on the USPTO to prove that they did their job. And that's the thing. Once you say a patent is too broad, the patent should have never been granted. It really becomes the USPTO's job to defend their decision And whose job is it to say they did wrong? Their job to say they did wrong. How many people in any sort of government position do you know that will say, yeah, we kind of messed up on that one and roll it back? It is notoriously borderline impossible to get patents ungranted because the patent office has to admit basically their fault in the matter, which is never going to happen. So it is going to be very, very difficult for that to happen. Now, former Pokemon CLO Don McGowan and others argue examiners lacked game design literacy. No shock there. These people are fucking ancient in these offices, okay? They missed obvious prior art across decades of summoning companion systems. We've already explained games that exist in that. Will these patents actually hold up? Many lawyers say enforcement is shaky, but we've already explained they don't need them to hold up in court. The fact that they own these patents is enough to deter anyone from moving forward and infringing on these at the mere thought of being sued by Nintendo. Because the mere thought of defending yourself can put you out of business. That's the problem here. Nintendo knows that. They know that. All right, let's talk to game developers here for a second, because there has been some discussions here about how to protect yourself. Document, document, document. Heavily scrutinize and read over the patents, because they're long, they're big, right? And they're intended to be big. That's what she said. They're intended to be a big read because they're designed to be legal enforcement, if you will. It's the documents that hold up your lawsuits against people if they've infringed on your patent. So they're very detailed. Understand those patents and document your titles and your games and your code and how they're potentially different. You don't have to necessarily not touch any of the patent, but you have to prove that your design is different than the patent in some way. Now, we're really hoping here that the Power World devs will fight this and will hopefully be the I don't want to say the voice of reason, but the sword that can actually puncture the armor of Nintendo, because that's what we truly need. Nintendo needs to feel some squeeze, and they haven't. Nintendo's really never felt any squeeze. Anyway, track the claim language. So for 397, the location-based appearance plus 2 battle roaming modes is core for that, right? And for 387, it's the automatic state change between air and ground boarding. If your flow doesn't fit that sequence, your risk goes down. So what Phil and I were talking about off camera is now the auto landing and the auto takeoff will probably no longer be, actually, I take that back. So for Warcraft, it's not an auto takeoff. You have to jump to trigger that, right? But the auto landing, you might now have to push a button to land. That's the difference here. It's the automaticness of it. So you're gonna probably start seeing some games change, or future games having some more involved button pushing to make different modes and things happen, including the companion follow, the companion fighting, and all that. You may have a companion now in future games that just stands there and watches you die and not auto attack. Because let's use Warcraft as an example again. If you're a hunter, or you're any sort of class that has a companion or a pet or a demon or whatever, you can put them in passive mode, where they quite literally will just stand there and watch you die. But you triggered passive mode, right? So it takes the autonomousness out of it, so that really wouldn't follow under that. But the question is whether or not, because when you summon that character, it's automatically in a mode where it won't automatically attack something unless you attack it, then it will. So that's the automatic mode. And then there's passive, where it won't do anything. And then there's aggressive, where it will just go after anything it sees. So the automatic mode is where it just follows you until you attack something, then it attacks. But that would still fall under this patent here. So patent 397. Let's talk about some TLDR here. What Nintendo just got was 2 freshly issued US patents tied to Pokemon style play. One covers summoning a sub-character to fight an enemy in a virtual space. The other covers smooth switching between rideable flying mounts and ground movement. The crazy thing is, it's under Pokemon, but my God, does that cover so many different games and genres, not just Pokemon, and that's the problem here. It's controversial because the claims were overbroad and thinly examined, and that falls squarely on the USPTO. Who could be in the blast radius? Basically everyone, to be honest. Almost everyone here. Hey, you know what? In warships, you can summon some ships can summon planes to go do things automatically. Does that fall under this? I don't know, is a ship a character? Define character. So that's the problem, is do you see the thinly examined and the overbroadness of this? But anyway, who could be in the blast radius? Everyone. We know who it's squarely pointed at. It's Power World, but there's a lot of collateral damage in this one. And the Patent Office criticism, well, it's probably time for the crypt keepers to retire and actually let some younger folks in there who understand the modern world and how some of this should have been examined. As I think, honestly, this one falls under either tinfoily hat theory here. Either there were some backroom discussions taking place outside of the traditional method at which these patents are applied and scrutinized and pushed back and checked, which is conspiracy theory land, because that would mean that there were some favors tossed in here. Who knows what money could have transpired in that instance? Because it's so, that's high level conspiracy theory right there, because it's hard for me to understand a world where the US Patent Office would just hand out something in exchange for favors or money, but I have no doubt in the 12,400,000 patents there's some of that that's existed. But at the very least, someone wasn't doing their job there. Those are the two, that's the spectrum. They just didn't do their job, they're lazy, or they got something in return for this. I don't know. Getting this reversed though is gonna be very, 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 very unlikely. Because again, it requires you to admit fault because you then audit yourself. There's no third party overseer in this. It's like conducting a job interview with yourself and arguing for a raise. Are you gonna say no?